Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so glad to have you here for our Kelley Alumni Career Webinar Series, with our first webinar being on the topic of coaching for switching. My name is Allison DeWitt. I am Director of Alumni Engagement here at the Kelley School of Business, and I am very excited to be able to partner with our Kelley Career Services team to bring you this short series of webinars over the next couple of weeks, and this especially excited to have our guest Terry Kramer joining us today to talk about an important topic that we are often asked a lot about, which is coaching through the process of switching careers or thinking about switching careers or making a big change in your professional life. Like I said, Terry and I often are asked about this question. I know Terry is one of our most sought after coaches here at Kelley for both our graduate students and for our alumni, and she spends quite a bit of time on this topic. So I'm very excited to have her here today to talk to all of you. A few quick housekeeping items that I will share. We do have live transcript and closed captioning or subtitles available for today's session. You should have the ability to turn those off or on at the bottom of your Zoom, so feel free to do that. We also will take questions throughout today's session. So I'm going to be here to help monitor the Q&A as well as the chat functions while Terry is sharing some information with us. So if you have any questions at all throughout today's session, please feel free to share those, and we will get those to Terry. If not during the presentation, we'll leave plenty of time at the end for those as well. But I'll give a quick formal introduction of Terry. I know she's here with us now, but I think you have some great credentials, Terry. So I'm going to share those with everyone here really quick. Terry is an associate director within Kelley Graduate Career Services, and is dedicated to helping talented people visualize the path that will enable them to affect positive change in their lives and in their places where they work. Before joining Kelley, Terry's professional contributions were within both corporate and higher education arenas. She has more than 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry in recruiting, communications, learning, and performance, organizational development, and change management. More recently, she worked at the School of Education at Northwestern University and was involved in program management, curriculum design, graduate student advising, and career coaching. I'm really excited to be able to bring Terry to all of you today and excited for a great conversation. So welcome, Terry.
Thanks for the intro, Allison, and welcome to everybody who's joined us today. So my task today is to share with you some ideas and some resources for making a successful job switch. And I'm going to begin that by setting a little context about what to consider when getting started. But first, let's just learn a little bit about you. Switching jobs it means different things to different people. So I want to start out by getting you thinking about what particular scenario, is yours, and then we'll take a little poll, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about what to think about with regards to your scenario. So maybe you recently lost your job, or you believe that your job is vulnerable sometime within the next 6 months. A lot of this is happening now in terms of people moving. Maybe with the pandemic, there was just a really big exodus from the cities and out to the burbs, and people changing states, and just a lot of reconsideration about where people wanted to live. So you need to find another job in a new city, perhaps, or you really dislike your current situation and you want to find a new position at another company. And you may be open to new opportunities and ready for a change. And then finally, you just want to move up at your current company in a different capacity. So I'm sure there's many other situations and questions that remain, but I'm going to bring up a poll and ask you to indicate what is or what might prompt you to make a switch with these 5 categories. So if you would go ahead and choose the selection that maybe most fits your situation. If none of these fit, don't, that's not a problem either. And if you do want to share what your, what your other situation is, or maybe what else, what else is prompting a desire to change jobs, then please go ahead and add that in the chat. All right, so Allison, go ahead and share if you haven't already with everybody to see, what people selected. And interestingly, it's not a lot different than what I see in terms of the population with our students when we do a similar kind of poll. So not very many of you mentioned that you are in search because you've either lost your job or you've seen the handwriting on the wall and you know that it's likely that you may not have a job in the next 6 months or so. If that's the case with you, there's not as much leverage when it comes to finding a new position. Obviously, you need to buy groceries. Your motivation, however, is going to be really high. And as you might imagine, you're not going to have the luxury of being as selective as maybe you would be in other circumstances. But this does not mean that you should take the first job that comes your way. You need to know your values and you need to understand your non-negotiables. So, where do you want to live? How much do you need to make to pay your bills? Do you need to work from home because of family commitments? So the more restrictions that you have, the harder it's going to be, to change an industry or function. But it doesn't mean that you can't do that down the road. It just means that the current situation requires you to be a bit more flexible. And we will, we'll talk about some of those options further on. Scenario 2, it's happening pretty often now with the ability to work remotely. And I'm really wondering if there's going to be a less need for some people to have to move in order to take on new roles. And I think that, some of the research and some of the headlines back some of that up. I read just recently some research shows that now post-pandemic, most employees prefer some sort of flexibility where they work. So just yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, an upcoming survey of 9,000 workers by Accenture found that 83% of respondents viewed a hybrid workplace as optimal, which means companies are going to need to figure out how to meet these expectations very fast. Companies with an in-person at-work requirement, they're worrying about a brain drain from their ranks. Companies that are hiring, some of them say they can't even find knowledge workers who are willing to come into an office 5 days a week. So the pandemic has really created a disruption in workplace mores in many ways. Scenario 3 is the one we hear often. The key here is motivation. So how motivated are you going to be to put in the work that you need to put in order to make the change? What we find sometimes is that when people really understand how much time and energy is involved with a search and making a career move, they can get overwhelmed and decide to stay at a company that's really not making them happy. The strategy here is to remind yourself of why you want to go as often as you can, so you stay motivated to do the work that's needed to make the change. And then scenario 4, just like what we saw today, it's the one that we do commonly see, which sort of is an indicator, people are open to moving. That old, we all know it, but it's interesting to see that old belief that, you stayed in one place for an entire career is long gone. But this is the situation, and people are generally okay with their job. Maybe it's not their dream job. And if somebody like Facebook or Google called, they'd be interested. The problem with that is you might be waiting for a long time for that call. You have to be intentional about your career moves. So even if a recruiter from your dream company reaches out, you're still going to need to do the legwork of networking and learning about the company to see if it's going to be a good fit for you. And then finally, scenario 5, you want to move up at your current company in a different capacity. So, but brand building and networking are skills that you're still going to need to refine, even if you want to move up or over at your current company. So with that, let me talk to you a little bit about thinking about making a switch. Imagine your job as a 3-legged stool with each leg a different dimension of your work. So it's the role or the function that you perform, the industry in which you work, and your geographical location. So when filling a vacant role, recruiters ideally want to hire what I call apples to apples. They want someone with the exact same skills, knowledge, and abilities as the person that they are trying to replace. So if you want to make a switch, it's important to look at your credentials through the lens of the recruiter. If you are going to make a change, how can you create a picture of yourself that enables the recruiter to make the connection between what they're seeking and the values that you can bring? This is a critical change in your frame of reference. It's not so. I coach students a lot and alums to understand that it's not about what's most important to them or what you happen to be most proud of, and that's what you showcase on your resume. It really needs to be, you need to look at your resume, your LinkedIn profile, your interview through the lens of what is the recruiter wanting to find out about you, so he or she can give you an interview and an opportunity for the job. That is subtle, but it's really critical. So what if you want to pivot to a new function in a new company? If you have the desire to do something different and take on more responsibility, think about roles that are collateral to your current role or that have many of the same competencies and transferable skills. So an example might be moving from sales or business development to a customer success or a consulting role, for example. If you want to make a more dramatic shift away from your current work, however, you may not have the relevant experience, your success is going to really depend on closing knowledge gaps through training or study, and as importantly, creating relationships within a network of decision makers. We're going to talk about networking a lot today. These people need to get to know you, and ultimately they're going to hire you for your potential to do the job, and they're going to recognize that you have the smarts and the motivation to be able to learn quickly, come up to speed, and that you can bring the diversity of your other experiences to add value. So when I'm coaching, we do a lot of work on that kind of messaging. If you're interested in switching industries, similar to switching roles, choose collateral industries if possible. For example, your career has been in retail, consider the food and beverage industry or consumer packaged goods. If you want to make a more dramatic industry pivot, you're going to need to deepen your knowledge and gain currency with the new industry trends. And you're going to want to likely choose premier companies who make multiple hires in that particular space. Now let's talk about changing your address. So if you aren't also changing industry and job function, changing your address is going to rely on identifying companies in the metro areas that you're interested in and conducting research to find those that align with what you value in your lifestyle choices. So getting that initial listing happens a number of ways. Chamber of Commerce websites, Vault has like a top 50 list. We'll go into some more detail about some of those tips and resources. But you want to narrow down your choices by thinking about listing all of the companies, setting some criteria, identifying whether or not there's a contact is a good example, and then ranking how each one meets your criteria so that you can focus in on just a few companies that you want to target. You can begin the process then of setting up job alerts on their websites, identifying contacts, building relationships. All of this can be done from your current location before you ever consider packing up and moving. And again, more on this later. So summary, if you plan to change more than one of these elements, function, industry, or location, anticipate adding some significant time to the research and plan to double down on networking into the organization so that you can build some relationships These can turn into, at the very least, some intel about the organization, and at the most, some good sponsorship and advocacy so that you can get your resume seen. So let's look at that timeline in a little more detail. So based on my and my colleagues' experience helping alums find jobs, here's the reality of the length of time each of these transitions take. Obviously, this is an average. It doesn't reflect all searches. You'll find exceptions, but this is a good way to look at it. So if you make no change from the time you start your active search to the time you start your new job, count on it about 3 months. If you're going to make one change, either industry, function, or location, you're going to add about 3 months onto that. Similarly, 2 changes, we're looking at 6 to 9 months, or a bridge position, and I'll talk about a bridge position in just a minute. If you're changing all 3, my friend Stephanie says you need to go to a resident MBA program and get an MBA, but if you don't have that option available to you, then plan on as much as a year and consider a bridge position. So let's look at what a bridge position could be. It enables you to move from your desired job by taking an intermediary role. So, for example, when I was talking about, collateral choices, if you're a financial analyst for Westinghouse, you can stay as a financial analyst, not changing your role or function, but changing your industry. Let's say you went to, Kraft Foods because you are interested in the CPG industry. Then having been a financial analyst at Kraft Foods now gives you some experience in the industry, and a recruiter can see, because you do know about the industry itself, then, given the credentialing and, your ability to demonstrate your ability to do the work, then you can move as a financial analyst to a marketing analyst at Chewy, for example. Another thing to do is kind of an up and over strategy, and that's working at Westinghouse as a financial analyst, internally networking, building sponsorship, getting agreement to be able to move to the marketing analyst role that you want within Westinghouse. And then being a marketing analyst will enable you to go get another marketing analyst job within a different industry. So that's what I mean by that sort of transitioning kind of a role. So let me tell you a quick story. So an MBA grad that I was coaching was a project manager with a home goods company prior to his joining Kelley for his MBA. When in Kelley, he fell in love with marketing and he really wanted to become a brand manager. And so that was a switch from project manager to brand manager. And he was really interested in consumer packaged goods. So he was changing both his role or function and his industry. But other than school, he really didn't have any experience in marketing. And unfortunately, he hit the market just when a flood of experienced marketers were losing their jobs due to the economic downturn. But he did all the right things. He took on some pro bono work, helping friends who were launching a business, creating marketing campaigns for them so that he could gain experience that he could speak to. He created messaging to show that his project management expertise brought value to the role. And this is so important, he networked like crazy with his Kelley network. And after about a year, he landed a marketing role with a technology home goods company that it covers products, services ranging from locks, doors, gates, entrance automation. So you can call this a bridge position because he's doing marketing, but for an industry collateral to his original industry. And he plans on, once getting some experience, he still loves CPG. So he plans to look for a CPG role in brand management. And this time he'll only be changing industries, not industry and role or function. So I'm very confident it's going to work out for him. So he was wise in doing that. So now let's talk about what a roadmap looks like for making that switch and finding a new job. All right, so step 1, you want to start with a strong foundation. So if you're still weighing options for what new job or industry you want to target, you need to create a strong foundation by understanding more about your own values and personality, and by getting really clear on the knowledge and the skills and abilities that you're able to contribute. Then next, start to identify the jobs that align with your strengths and your preferences. So now that you're armed with an understanding of your own strengths, capabilities, some of your preferences, you're going to start researching the jobs and companies that interest you. Step 3, once you have this sort of strong, compelling messaging for why you're excited about this new role or industry or location, and the talents that you're going to be able to contribute, then you're ready for those next steps, which are ensuring your career documents align with the marketplace needs. And by career documents, I mean your LinkedIn profile, your resume, et cetera, and starting to establish a network of contacts within the companies that you're targeting. We're not going to spend a lot of time today on the actual, once you have this all figured out and sort of ready for post step 3, but I'm going to give you a lot of resources that you can access, including some advice for how to create an appointment with myself, or who you'll hear from later, Joshua's team in Indianapolis, to have a coaching session. All right, let's talk about each one of these steps. So step 1, starting with a strong foundation. So it really involves understanding the skills and strengths that you have that both you and others are aware of. And it also involves a realistic assessment of where you might be vulnerable. So things that addressing what you have, those things that you can, and creating messaging around those things that you can't. So assessments, feedback, reflection, you can start to develop some real clarity around who you are and what you stand for, which in effect becomes your personal brand. So it involves knowing your interests. So let's say you have a passion for sports. I mean, some of these interests can be your outside of your professional interests, but you want to work in a corporate finance function. So we really work and coach, help people integrate, some of their loves outside and inside of their work, so that you might be able to combine the type of job function you want with an industry you're really interested in, to make the fit that much more appealing. So you need to know what motivates you. So are you motivated by money, variety and challenge, autonomy, visibility, or connection with a mission, or all of the above? So in what industry would your way of motivation be rewarded? So if competition and money motivate you, perhaps a commission based sales role would fit. Also, inventory your professional and personal priorities. Is it important for you to have a set work schedule? Do you want to travel? Do you want the ability for upward movement? Do you value stability? So oftentimes one of the most clear indications of whether or not a career transition is going to be successful is just that it lines up with what you want, and whether or not that actually exists or where it exists. So again, not taking time to complete this portion of the job search process is really it's like going on a trip somewhere you've never been before without a map. So as a coach, I often find that when people neglect this portion of the search, they chase something only to realize it's not what they thought or expected. Then there's a high risk of misalignment with their skills, interests, and values, and what the organization needs in terms of those skills or the values that the organization holds. All right, some helpful tips and tricks here. So values and personality are foundational to understanding the kind of jobs that you're going to be set up for success with. And so here in GCS, we invite students to take personality and values assessments. There are a lot of free ones out there. I've included a couple of web links to a couple of personality assessments and one of the value assessments. You can find these on the web. And you can ask the question, what do your top values tell you about the kind of job you'd be most satisfied having? And then with personality, what describes you? So many of you in jobs, you maybe have been in jobs where you've taken these assessments already and received other kinds of feedback, that do provide you insights into your personality, your skills, and your communication preferences. So take an inventory of that. When you look across this information, what does your personality assessment feedback tell you about your preferences and your motivators? One of the exercises that I sometimes encourage my coachees to do in order to have an outside perspective of what are the skills and the abilities that they have that they want to understand so that they can, leverage it in the job search, is to actually go through the exercise of writing down your top 10 achievements in your life so far. After those 10 achievements are written down, rank order them to choose your top 3. Then you're going to find a friend or a colleague who's a good listener, and you're going to describe those top 3 achievements in detail, just like you were telling the plot of a movie. First I did this, and then I did this, and then I did that. You're going to ask your friend to listen carefully and write down all the knowledge, skills, and abilities that he or she heard in your story that you told. Some rules: your friend doesn't get to interrupt or ask questions during the exercise, and you don't get to explain or add additional context. All you're doing is just moving through your story. And once you've told your top 3 stories, then review the results to look for the trends and the things that are emerging that are, that seem to be threads that run through what it is you like to do and how you've been successful in doing it. So that's an exercise I encourage you to consider. Another way that you can gain some clarity around your interests and your motivations is to inventory your professional and your personal priorities. So we use this exercise in the MBA Leadership Academy and a version of it in the career development course that we offer our Kelley Direct MBA students. So you basically identify 3 to 5 items in each of these categories. What do you want to have accomplished within the next 3 years or 5 years or 1 year? You can choose your time frame, that's fine, depending on when you want to make your job switch. What ways do you want to have grown and developed within that time? And how do you want to have experienced joy? And what are the experiences that you want to have? So when you've completed that, you want to choose your top 3 priorities based on what you're most motivated to work on. And that can really give you some clues about what you need to pursue next. So let's say that your top 3 priorities really center around, let's say, family and some personal development. And really, you surprise yourself by recognizing that, making a job move or, creating change around your professional life isn't really your very top priority right now for the period of time that you've identified. And that's good to know too, because then you can decide putting in place some goals and some plans for being able to get those top priorities underway. So those are some of the things that you can consider when you want to really learn about yourself and make a strong start. Now let's talk about step 2. So identifying jobs that align with your strengths and your preferences. So when you're pivoting to a new job and making a career switch, the questions you want to ask are some of these. So figuring out, and one of the really key ones is the last one there. So how strong is your network in these areas? And if it's not strong at all, that's fine. You just know that you've got some work ahead. So let's look at a couple of helpful tools and tips around really identifying and doing that company research on the kind of jobs that have good alignment. So you can gather information about industries, companies, and roles of interest. This requires some research in identifying companies in the metro areas you're interested in and finding those that align with your values and your lifestyle choices. So getting that initial listing can happen a number of ways. You can look at Chamber of Commerce websites. Vault publishes a top 50 list. Best companies to work for publish a number of lists in different kinds of categories. Best company for women, best company for culture. So there's all these different ways that they look at the data and report that data. So the couple of the website addresses that I listed there are both for Vault and which has listings of top ranked professions by industry, as well as Great Place to Work, which just lists companies by all those different, by a number of different categories. Something else to mention, which is a really nice perk for Kelley alums, is the free LinkedIn training that we offer. So this training will instruct you on how to find job descriptions that you're going to be interested in. Something that is going to really pay off for you if you put some time into it is going out and finding job descriptions. And you don't really care about the company unless you're really targeting a specific industry. And you don't really care about the geography at this point. What you're looking for are really well-written job descriptions. So what you want to do is go out, find a number of those, and start to educate yourself on what you see are the common qualifications and the requirements that sort of play out across all the jobs, all the jobs that you found for this set. Once you have built that understanding up, that's going to be really valuable for you in terms of how to align your resume, for example, how to create a keyword listing and making sure that's going to show up in your LinkedIn profile or your resume. And basically starting to help you develop messaging so that you can talk about how, even if you don't have exact same work experience, how the experiences that you do bring add diversity and how you'll be able to, quickly adapt and quickly shift to what the new job responsibilities are. So I'm going to share more with you about how to access this training at the end when I talk about the alumni Canvas site that we offer and that we make available to all of our alums. Another idea is to think about job titles that your fellow Kelleys have. So the Alum Canvas site has links to LinkedIn Kelley alum groups. Maybe also, Allison, maybe at the end you can talk a little bit about any other resources that that alums can take a look to help them, research and connect with people that might have jobs that they would want to learn more about. So step 3. So once you have clarity about your job preferences, you're now ready to activate your network. So you want to do this by conducting informational interviews so that you can get some firsthand info on what others are finding interesting about their work and what they find challenging about the roles that you're considering. So find Kelleys who are in those jobs, again, via LinkedIn, taking advantage of the training that I just mentioned, and make use of the Kelley Alum Association. So, and then think about your own personal networks as well. So what organizations are you and your family members a part of that have others who have networks that are very different from yours that you can tap? So we could have a whole seminar just on this topic, but what I want to do is just to give you very quickly. A lot of times people ask, well, like what's some guides for some, what I would talk about. So actually it's one of the books, and I at the end I'm recommending a couple of books, and I forgot to add this one. It's called the 20-minute networking meeting. It's a really helpful book that really gives you a lot of detail about how do you actually craft these kinds of conversations. But a lot of times my favorite questions are, how did they land the job that they currently have? So you can begin to understand about what the hiring process is for that particular company. Also, where do they plan to go next? Because that helps you kind of understand a career path. What do they enjoy and find challenging about their role? So that can help you start to say, would I also find the same things enjoyable and challenging? And then key success factors for strong performance in the job. What are the deal breakers? What are the things that really help with advancement and high performance in that role? And then companies that the person you're interviewing admires, and any contacts within their network that they might recommend that you talk to, because typically you will get the job from a secondary or even tertiary contact. And then generally, what advice and guidance do they have for you? So those are pretty simple questions, but oftentimes they will invite a really robust conversation where you're learning a lot about yourself and what you care about. You need to be prepared to share a compelling story about your experiences and the knowledge and skills that you've gained as a result. In probably 2 minutes or less. That's the key, is all of your part in talking in this dialogue is asking questions, and very little of your sharing your own information. So be ready to describe your top strengths and achievements, and be ready to talk about how your knowledge, skills, and abilities can add value, but do it in a really concise and succinct way. Okay, like I mentioned, there's a couple books that I think can be really, really helpful, and I'm pretty high on these. Designing Your Life really helps give you more of the tools and approaches for that first step that I talked about, starting with a strong foundation. It uses design thinking principles to get at what motivates you and how to craft some life plans that bring a lot of, that will ultimately bring you a lot of satisfaction and fulfillment. It's very practical, and it has exercises and reflections really to allow you to tailor them to your particular situation. So the practicability aspect of this book is something I'm very impressed with. And then the 2-Hour Job Search was written quite a while ago by Steve Dalton, and I believe he's at the Darden. I think he's at Darden. He has just released a second edition, and so it had been years and years since I read it, and I just read his second edition, and it is greatly improved with a lot of additional things that he's learned in his job as a career services coach. And I'm really impressed with it because it picks up where Designing Your Life leaves off. In other words, it's really looking at that company search and activating your search, steps 2 and 3. It has a very practical and expedient way to get your job search off the ground. So if you follow the very prescriptive process that he identifies, you're going to be able to choose companies that meet the criteria you have around things that you value and what your what your requirements are for the company that you want to work for. And it allows you to really focus on those first, because those criteria allowed you to choose those that are going to yield success most likely. So it really helps you narrow down and get to some companies where you're going to be able to get some fast traction. And then with that prioritized list, which he claims that you can get created in 2 hours, and after rereading it recently, I believe him. So armed with that list, then it goes on to talk about how to network in a really practical, detailed way. Designing Your Life also has some really good, just practical networking stories, because I think one of the things that probably daunts people the most is it really is hard to reach out to strangers or even people because you're asking for a favor. You probably won't hear from some percentage of them. That rejection's kind of hard to take too. There's just a lot of reasons why networking is difficult, but the more you do it, the more you'll be convinced at the results and the benefit it gives you. And quite frankly, it is the way that you will get your next job, especially if you are switching. It won't happen from applying to just jobs on job boards. I can guarantee you that. Sometimes it's like winning the lottery. I hear stories every now and again where that did happen for people, but way more often I hear stories about, I don't understand, I've applied to 2,000 jobs and I'm not hearing from anybody. Well, there's a lot of reasons for that, and again, that could be a whole seminar on its own, but the bottom line is, unless you are networking, you're just not going to get the gig. So that's critical. All right, so now you are ready to apply to jobs, you're ready to interview and get the offer. Details for engaging in all of these next steps in the job search are in the Get Market Ready Toolkit on the Kelley Alum Canvas site, where you can find many more resources to support your job search and your career goals. So speaking of resources, let's wrap up by telling you about the resources that we make available for all of our alums. So we've created a Kelly Alum Career Services website. And on that website, you're going to see instructions for how to be able to subscribe to the Kelly Job Board, where you can set up job alerts and have jobs pushed out to you. We have resume guidance and templates. There's where you can get the instructions to set up an account for the free LinkedIn training that I mentioned, info on cover letters, how to network, how to interview, and how to negotiate offers, the best thing of all. And then, we also have I Am a Coach that's available to talk with alums. So if you want to set up a meeting with me or any other query, then the email is listed there. And we are fortunate today to be joined by Joshua Killey. He's the director of Indianapolis Career Services. And I'm going to turn it over to him for a minute to let him tell you a little bit about the presentation that he's going to give on June 10th around salary negotiations and how to get in touch with him in Indianapolis.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. So yeah, for the Kelly Indianapolis alums, we do have coaches that can help you more tailor your search, really determine what it is that's best going to meet your needs. So that kicks at iupui.edu, short for Kelly Indianapolis Career Services, is going to be the best way to contact us and get those meetings scheduled. And then, as Terry mentioned, on Thursday, June 10th, we're going to talk specifically about salary negotiations, talk about higher level strategies, and really answer some of the frequently asked questions pertaining to salary negotiations. We understand these topics can be very defined. Your own unique needs come into play. So we're going to make certain that you also have access to us to be able to help coach you through those conversations as well. So thank you, Terry.
Yeah, of course. Man, I wish we had a groovy acronym like KICS for our group instead of GCS Help, but whatever. I like KICS a lot. All right. So in closing, I want to share with you a graphic that one of my colleagues posted on LinkedIn. So for some of us, the pandemic was a teacher. It allowed us to reconnect with what we value, what's important in our lives. If you had some insights like these, be sure to hang on to them. Don't let them fade, and make plans for getting what you need, and let us help in whatever capacity we can. So that's all I have for you today. And we're going to spend the rest of our time answering any questions that you have for us.
Thank you so much. What just plethora of information you have shared with us. It's very good to see this, and starting to have some questions coming into one of the more frequent questions was people asking about if we're going to share these resources later, and just want everyone to know, yes, we will. I'll collect all of these different things that Terry has talked about, and we will certainly send a follow-up email to all of you who have registered, and we'll also send the recording of this session to you all as well. So never fear. I know there was a lot of stuff shared, so if you weren't able to write it all down, no problem. We've got you covered in that space. But Terry, there were a couple of questions that I think would be great if you have a few minutes to spend on answering. I'm pulling them up right here. What is maybe some specific advice you would have for an older person, early 50s, that's their words, everyone, not mine, looking to make a major switch? Is it possible? How does ageism factor into the plan?
Yeah. So I do coach a lot of people that have long in the tooth with lots of years of experience. The reality is some companies, you'll find some age bias, but a lot of companies do not. A lot of companies welcome the diversity and the experience that you can bring. One of the things that you'll need to do is try to sort of read between the lines in the job description to understand what some of the potential biases might be. Is, how much of a technology component, for example, is there in the role? And then that gives you some clues for how you can start to develop some messaging to be able to alleviate the concerns that a reviewer or anybody you're having a conversation might have about your ability to be very current with technologies that are commonly used within the workplace, for example. So I think by really unpacking the job description and really trying to get at, and get inside a reviewer's head about where they might have reservations, and in the conversation to actually address those. So I coach people, if they don't ask, it doesn't mean that they're not thinking it. So a lot of times just really saying, one of the things I'd really like to share is, and then be able to address those concerns. So I think that by taking that approach, that can a lot of times, at least the recruiter, they're listening, or the reviewer is listening for things that can help them be confident in your ability to do the job. So if you do a good job with your messaging, then you can overcome things like age bias.
Thanks, Terry. That is helpful. I will just remind everyone that we've got a few more minutes here to take some questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So feel free to send those in the chat or in the Q&A. Got a few more coming in. So here's another one, Terry, that I'd like to pose to you. I just used an outside offer as leverage in a relocation negotiation with my current job, but I have scheduled an interview with my dream company. Will I burn any bridges if I end up moving forward with the other opportunity after just accepting a generous offer from my current employer?
Yes, you could burn some bridges there, I would say. But I also give you major props for making all of that happen in your life. That's wonderful. So yeah, because there's somewhat of an unwritten contract. If they made the adjustment for you and offered that up, then they're gonna probably feel like they're entitled for you to have somewhat of a stay. So recognize that could be a possibility, and you just mitigate it as much as possible. The people that you know and trust and that have a relationship with you, try to meet with them one-off and talk to them about your rationale, why it's important, and to the degree you can, gain their advocacy, because what they might be able to do is mitigate maybe some of the bad feeling that might happen when you do fly the coop. I think if you remain positive, gracious, grateful, and you still make it clear that you need to do what you need to do, I think people at the end of the day would respect that, because maybe if they were in the same circumstance, they'd make the same choice.
Thanks, Terry. Because it has a negotiation, theme to that. Reminded me that I've just shared the registration link for our next webinar that Terry and Joshua mentioned on June 10th about salary negotiations. So if anyone wants to learn more on that topic or have some more other discussion in that area, we'd love for you to join us on the 10th. Couple of other questions. Terry, we've had a few people ask us about what that alumni coaching looks like. Can you speak a little bit to maybe if someone would reach out to you with an interest in coaching, what would that process look like? What's involved? Are there costs involved? Some questions around that.
Sure, yeah. Well, the very good news we can say right off the bat is there are no costs involved. So you get Kelly Career Services for life. So that is probably a nice perk that a lot of Kellys don't either recall or even know about. So it's a good thing. And I'm glad all 55,000 alums don't know about it, because that might make Josh's team and a bit stretched. but I would say it's a range. So I have people that I coach that just need me to take a look at our resume toolkit, get a good template, come up with the guidelines and create their best shot at an open marketplace resume. And then they have me look at it and provide them some feedback. Same thing with the LinkedIn profile, being able to optimize that. And I'll usually suggest take the LinkedIn training first, give it your best shot. Let me take a look and I'll give you feedback. And then we have people that have issues that they want to talk through. So we usually create and in my team, we have half-hour appointments. And so we can talk about whatever is important to you, whether that's how to move up within my organization, or, you know, what particular phase you are in the job search. I meet multiple times with some people, you know, who want to check in with me sort of at each key phase of the job search process. That's absolutely fine. Like I said, others are one and done. If you want to get into more what we typically call executive coaching, you know, where you're really wanting to get in a lot more detail about what's going on with you, or the politics you're navigating, you know, some pretty sophisticated things that you might be working through that either are impeding your ability to be successful, et cetera, then what I do is supply you with some resources for executive coaching that you can look up. And for example, Kelly offers, and IU in general also offers, some executive coaching options, and they're really reasonably priced. And honestly, it's almost like therapy. If you can afford it, everyone would benefit from an executive coach. So I really encourage you to take advantage of that. But when it comes to career services work, you know, we're there for you.
Yeah, it really is such a great resource. And our alumni association team and Terry's team, between us and all of us at Kelly and in Indianapolis too, are working to aggregate as many of those resources together in one place as you can. So I also just shot the link of our alumni webpage in there, and we try to link out to some of the, we have some links on some of those executive coaching that Kelly does, some of the other webinars we've done, all the different, lots of different professional development and career services opportunities can be found there. And we will only continue to add to that webpage as we continue to learn about more things too. One other thing I was going to mention, Terry, I have a couple more questions if we have just a couple of seconds here. We'll still have a few minutes, so
Yep.
Keep them coming, everybody. Keep the questions coming. I love this question. Many of the networking skills are difficult for those of us who are introverts. Are there any specific recommendations you might have for networking, particularly if that is, you know, naturally not an area of comfort for someone?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the more that you can plan for the conversation and visualize how it's going to go, you know, you've got your questions mapped out, you're clear on the outcomes that you want, and recognize that you're not doing most of the talking. You're just asking powerful questions and having people answer. I think that really helps a lot. And the reality is your fourth networking conversation is going to be easier than your third, and your fifth is going to be easier than your fourth. I mean, so the more you do it, the more it's just going to become more natural feeling. And schedule a nap afterwards, and so that you can recharge your energy. For those introverts, you can plan for a nap to help you face the next one that comes up. So but anyway, I'm joking kind of about that, but really the more you can plan, the more confident you're going to be coming into it.
I think that's a great tip, Terry. If there are any other questions, we have a couple more minutes. Feel free to share those. I did want to mention one other thing. I believe most of the individuals on this call are Kelly alumni, but if you are happened upon this through Indiana University and you're not a Kelly alum, but you're an Indiana University alum, we're glad you're here as well. We're also happy to connect you with some other career services resources that the Indiana University Alumni Association offers. We can also help make any other connections within the different campuses or university as well. So feel free to reach out to me if that happens to be you. And we're happy to also help you make those connections across the institution.
Yeah, Erin Irwin and her team in IUAA are awesome. They're great.
Absolutely. They're very, yeah, they're great partners and offer a lot of great services as well. I think that was all of the questions that we have. So always happy to end a meeting or a session early, give people the gift of time. Again, we hope to see you at a future webinar or utilizing a future resource. We've thrown a lot of links in the chat for you, but again, we'll follow up with some additional information via email. Terry, any last words, any final thoughts as we wrap up today?
Yeah, I just think I would say probably the main thing is, especially since most of the audience said that they're open to possibilities, is, look for somebody to help, do the work of figuring out what it is you want. Don't be satisfied with a job that, is, meh, and get help and accountability partners, and, make it happen so that you can be happier and more fulfilled.
I love it. Thank you so much, Terry. I threw my email in the chat if anyone has any future questions or needs. We've got a lot of great comments of thanks and some excellent information, Terry. So I think we were able to provide a great service today. So thank you and your team for all you do for our Kelley alumni. Our career services is truly amazing. It's one of the things that truly makes Kelley special. And thanks to Joshua and his team up in Indianapolis. Excited to learn more from them here in a couple of weeks. And with that, we hope you all stay well and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.